Welcome to the Raising Values podcast, where the traditional family talks. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. You can support the Raising Values podcast through Patreon. Phil and Gillian are behind the mic, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome back to Raising Values. Today we're going to have a little discussion about something that almost universally causes disagreements. Is that a polite way of saying spouses to fight like cats and dogs?
I think that's a very polite way. Disagreement. Yeah, disagreements. We'll go with that.
Yeah, I mean, given that, like, I don't recall, in my head I want to say it is the most common reason for spouses to argue. And if it's not the most, it's pretty far up there, is money. Mm-hmm. Spending habits, budgeting, priorities, like, and it has to be as common of an argument as it is because it's an important thing.
Our finances are, it drives everything. It drives, like, why you go to work. It pays your bills. It keeps your lights on. It buys you things. Like, it's such a staple and such a big part of life. Like, finances are just, it makes up most of your life. So I can understand why it is one of the top reasons why couples argue or fight or disagree or whatever action verb you want to put in there, because it's very important.
Well, and I think, as I'm wont to do often, I think finances wind up being an ancillary for other things. In other words, like, we blame money for being what we're fighting about when the fight is really something adjacent to that money just happens to interact with. Like, when you have a conversation about spending habits, it's not necessarily a conversation about money. It's a conversation about what you prioritize, what I prioritize. It's a conversation about the merit of, like, intentional spending versus emotional spending. Like, oh, I really want Starbucks today. I'm going to go get Starbucks because
I have such a problem.
Well, I wasn't going to call you out, but it's those disagreements of, like, if you spend like $5 at Starbucks every morning because you just really like your vanilla frappe, whatever, but then I go buy green coffee beans and roast them myself, and I have, like, basically gourmet coffee here at the house for pennies on the dollar compared to a coffee shop. My way of looking at it is, like, I am saving that money, so I should be able to spend that money somewhere else. But
I've gotten a lot better.
You have.
When we first,
this wasn't meant for me to dog you out. This was like
No.
This was supposed to be an example that I imagine a lot of the audience could probably relate to, and it's not just coffee. It's clothing. It's anything. It always comes down to, where do you prioritize your money? And when you have husband and wife that are, like, financially, legally tied together for the course of that marriage, like, well,
and possibly beyond. Even
Yes.
if a divorce happens, you're still legally responsible financially for things.
Yep. Child support and alimony, 18 to life.
Yeah. So, when we first got together, I mean, we've said this on multiple episodes of Raising Values and Matter of Facts, but I was not the best. I had horrible spending habits. I lived a life of, there was money burning a hole in my pocket, and so I spent the money. At that point, though, and when I was like 18 to, say, 25, I didn't make myself go into debt. I just relied on you more to do things that I could have helped with. So, like, groceries or things like that.
Yeah.
But,
and my spending habits weren't, I would like to say when we first got there, my spending habits were a little bit more conservative. They weren't great, but, I mean, for a 20-something-year-old guy, they weren't that bad either.
No,
Like,
they weren't.
Like, I did have a credit card. It was self-secured, low interest rate. I did what most people in their 20s do, and I let it accrue X amount of, principal on it, and then I started noticing that the interest payments were a reasonable amount of money, and that was what kind of shocked me into pay this thing off, shred it, get rid of it. But, like, I think the hard thing, and the thing we're going to get to this very first banner, is like the hardest thing for the two of us, I feel like, was when we moved into our apartment together. Was it a month before we got married? It was pretty close.
It was a month before we moved in together, a month before we got married.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But the hard thing we had to come together on was, it was a home budget, and it sounds like that shouldn't be a hard thing to figure out. Like, you make this much money and you have this much bills and everything else ought to be pretty self-explanatory. But I remember.
I know exactly who that is. Hold on, we have a comment and now. All right, so our friend from Texas said you saved money by roasting the coffee, but you spent time doing it, which means you didn't do something Gillian told you to do.
Do you want to indulge that?
You go for it.
Because we can have a conversation about the time you spend reading your books.
We're gonna pass.
So is time also going to be a budgeting thing?
Time is money.
Time is money.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to budget time. And I know we're on home budget, but because of that comment, I can say, like, last night I did a post on Instagram, Facebook, about how I have been kind of absent from social media as far as the Raising Values podcast goes. And it's not for lack of wanting to keep everyone in the loop of Raising Values, but May is a really hard month. And every weekend we have something going on. Almost every afternoon we have something going on. And so, plus I'm closing down a classroom and I'm getting all the stuff at work done and getting ready for the summer and all that stuff. And
it seems like every child's birthday is in May.
Right. Why did we do that to ourselves? We planned this, but at that point we didn't know how rough May was. But anyway, so I have had to budget my time, and all of my time has been budgeted towards family and projects and things happening in May. And Raising Values has taken a back seat as far as social media goes. Now, we still get up here on Sundays and we live stream and things like that. And you're still working because Phil is my editor, our editor.
Producer.
Everything. And so you still have to make the time to push these episodes out on Tuesdays. But that's about it. That's all we're really doing until I can get a better grasp on my time and focusing on what's important. And not that Raising Values is not important, but my family and Piper comes first. And these times are fleeting, so I'm going to be present, especially during this time. Plus, what else? The other thing I put in there is that I've leveled up on my napping skills and game. So I've literally come home almost every day and fallen asleep in the chair. But anyway, so that's what it is. So yes, you have to budget your time and your money and prioritize what's important. And thank you, our friend from Texas, who reminded us of that.
Yes. But insofar as home budget on the face of it, it seems like it should be a pretty simple subject. Money comes in, money has to go out, and then there's gray area in the middle. But what I found very quickly when like you and I first started discussing home budget was that the black and white of bills and like net income, that wasn't up for debate. It was everything in the middle.
Yeah.
It was, well, we have a little bit of a windfall. Where do we spend it? Do we spend it going out to eat? Do we spend it putting in savings? Do we spend it, like, I think at that point, neither one of us had any debt. I mean, we graduated school debt-free, thank God. That was a lot of hard work to get there.
Yes.
We owned our vehicles, like, outright. We didn't have car loans at that point when we first got married.
No, when we first got married, I think, my car was paid off. I did have debt, though, that I wasn't aware of.
Mm-hmm. The medical bills.
Medical bills from my car accident. And that was a big hullabaloo, but that was something that we were able to pay off and get that taken care of. But as far as, like, big debt...
Hey, Benji, please continue.
As far as like big debt, we didn't have that. And at that moment in our lives, we were renting, so we didn't have mortgage and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, but the things we debated over were like putting money into savings, or like going out with friends, or like the I mean, we used to have, I don't know if they were ever really angry arguments, but there were some pretty vigorous debates over like just basic spending. Because like, I know at that time it was very convenient for you working in the French Quarter to just go out for lunch. And I point out to you, I'm like, honey, that's like $20 a day you're burning,
10
for
to $20 a day
for an entree plus tip.
Yeah.
And at that point, like I was packing like sandwiches, tuna fish, Vienna sausages. Like I was packing my lunches. I'd get a little box of chicken nuggets at Chick-fil-A at college, but then I would have my dinner packed at. A lot of times I'd have lunch and or dinner packed to go out to the airfield to work. Sometimes we'd order pizza, like if we got a big tip on the ramp. But it was just one of those things of it was like, I can see how this $20 a day adds up, and if that's how you want to spend your money, that's fine. But if you spend it $20 a day eating lunch, you don't have it somewhere else. So like this was the beginning of the two of us realizing that we spent money very differently, and we had to find a way to meet in the middle on the budget. Like we had to agree, if you're going to spend basically $100 a week to go eat lunch, that's fine. But that has to go in this budget.
Yes. And when we first got married and we first started talking about home budgets, I put up the most fight. My immature self put up the most fight, because a budget to me was my husband is telling me how I can spend my money. And I couldn't stand it. I did not want you. And that's one reason why we had separate finances. So we still do. We still have separate bank accounts. We don't have a joint account. But it was more of the impression of my husband's telling me what I can and can't spend my money on if we do this budget. And if I don't uphold my end of the deal on this budget, then I'm going to be in trouble somehow, or we're going to fight about it or whatever. So I put up a huge fight about home budgeting for a long time. Mm-hmm. I know that. I could admit to that. But
I'm proud of you.
I did grow. I think once we bought the house, which was, 3 years later? We were only in the apartment for 3 years, and then we had Piper. And things kind of changed because now, I don't know, it was almost like something clicked and it's like, okay, now you're really an adult. You're not just married renting. Now you're married having a baby and you own a home. So, and at that point, I had another car accident. Not my fault. This one wasn't. But, working in the French Quarter, you meet a lot of drunk people, and some drunk person T-boned me in the French Quarter, so I had to get a new car. So here we are, pregnant, owning a home, just buying a home, and now I have a new car payment. So budget had to be implemented. Yeah. Absolutely had to be implemented.
I also think like one of the things I point out to you in one of these discussions that, at least from my perspective, really seemed to change your thinking was, I'm like, this, because I remember you made the comment, and I know my father's going to hear this later, and he's going to laugh because this is straight out of your father-in-law's
Do you know
mouth.
What your father-in-law would say? I tell him that all the time.
Well, you've heard me use the Bill Gates analogy, right? Like Bill Gates lives on budget. He just has more zeros behind everything than mine does. But I pointed out to you, I'm like, having a home budget doesn't mean you can't spend money. It just means it's accounted for.
Yeah, you just have to budget.
Yeah, like
for where you spend money.
If you like to get your nails done once a month, or get
Which
your
I don't.
or if you want to get your hair, I'm throwing out as many examples as I can to cover the broadest spectrum of the audience. But like, and turn around for men. If you like to go to the bar every now and then, if you like to smoke cigars, if you like to spend money on firearms or cars or whatever you like to do, you just make a line item in the budget that says, I have $100 to spend on this month. And if I don't spend it this month, it rolls to the next month, so I have $200 the next month. And all a home budget is being accountable for this money is allocated for this thing. Mm-hmm. And once it's allocated, unless something changes the budget, which sometimes things pop up, but once it's allocated, you spend it guilt-free. Mm-hmm. Like if you put $20 a month in to get your nails done, go get your nails done. But if you go get your nails done the second time, now we have a problem. Because now that's money that wasn't allocated.
Right.
And it was that discussion, I feel like, that really changed your thinking of, okay, this isn't saying we have to live in poverty. This isn't saying we can't spend money.
This is just my husband telling me where I can and can't spend my money.
This is literally just saying, like, okay, like, and I think at that time, you made more money than me, not dramatically more, but you made a bit more money than I did. I was still working a basically college job, working my way through my last year of college. But like, I was very frank with you about the fact that like, of our income, 60% of it's yours. So I feel like it's fair you pay 60% of the bills, roughly.
Right.
And I'll pay 40%. These are your bills. These are my bills. We kept separate accounts. We had separate income. And we kind of like, we met in the middle on the budget, but our decision to have separate accounts and separate responsibilities was really born out of the fact that like, you wanted to maintain more of your independence, which I was okay with. And frankly, I wanted to maintain more of my independence at that point. I mean, Gillian and I, you know, it's not like we met when we were 18 years old and had nothing. Like, by the time we met, we'd kind of started the process of establishing ourselves. So the idea of, like, completely giving up full autonomy was a little bit tumultuous for both of us, I think.
Yeah.
But that whole idea of meeting in the middle on the budget was like, okay, these are your bills. After you pay your bills, spend your money. Spend it. Go out with your friends. Go get your nails done. Go get your hair done. Spend your money. I encourage you to put some in savings. But I tried never to be dictatorial about it. But by establishing that home budget and then doing our best to adhere to it, we were in a position where we knew what the bills were going to be, and we had the money to pay the bills, and there was never I spent $200 at the bar last night, so now I don't have enough to pay the electric bill, which that happens to families. And I try to tell everybody, I'm like, if you know you have an electric bill coming up tomorrow, and the last $100 in your bank account is what's going to pay that bill, you should make an intelligent, mature decision to abstain from spending that money on other nonsense. That is the function of a home budget, is just planning ahead, like to crib something from the other podcast that's being prepared to be a responsible adult. We now have just a joint account. Since I'm the sole income earner, when we got together, we each had separate accounts and a joint account for the bills. Now, see, this was something Gillian and I did debate, although having completely separated accounts has worked fine for us. I did tell her quite a while ago, though, like when we first moved in here, we were having Piper, I pretty much gave you the option of, do you want to be a stay-at-home mom or do you want to go back to work? And I had said, if you want to be a stay-at-home mom, there's one account, there's one income. I have to have control of the money because I'm the only one bringing it in. And, you know, like to me, that it's the differences between the two of us being a joint income family and a sole income family. And I can't get my head around the idea that like we would have a single income, but then there'd be one party who can just spend money with impunity without informing the other. Yeah. And even with the two of us being joint income, like the fact of the matter is, if Gillian goes out and takes out like a $200,000 loan in her name tomorrow, I'm still on the hook for it legally. So
No, I'm joking.
I don't encourage you to do that because you're not going to like the result.
Nah, I'm not going to do that.
So home budget requires a meeting in the middle, but what about personal budget? Like when you hear, oh, I have $200 after all the bills are paid. You now have $200 you can spend, you can put in savings, you can do whatever. Now this is where the personal aspect of budgeting comes into play.
Well, knowing myself, if I've already budgeted, which when I budget, I do keep like a paper budget so I can actually see where my money is going. And so I usually do budget out for fun things, and you know, maybe I budget out $50 for Amazon this month or whatever, because you know, I'm just addicted to Amazon. Sometimes I don't even know what's coming when they put it on the doorstep. Sometimes. But
Jeff Bezos approves.
Right? But for now, like now in my life, I look at my savings account and think, "Oh my God, there's nothing in it." And there's money in it, but it's not something that if everything blew up on us, I would not be able to help very much at all. But I did take a little bit of a step down in pay when I took this new position. So my budget doesn't allow for me to put a whole lot into savings every month. And that kind of like really hurts me because I know that savings needs to be there. And the other thing is I don't have retirement. And so I feel very guilty about that. That's something that I never thought when I got my first quote unquote big girl job, I didn't think much about retirement. And so I didn't go into that program when I was working for Audubon, which I should have. But at 22, you don't think about those things for the most part. For most people don't. But anyway, and now there's really no offering from the jobs that I've had, the different companies that I've worked for, where there is a retirement fund or anything like that. So savings has to be where I put my money. There's no compounded interest. There's no anything that's adding to it. But personal budgets, once you explain to me this isn't like your money's not going straight to just bills, and you can't have fun and you can't do fun things with your money. It got a lot easier for me to budget in. Okay, well, you know what? This month I really want to go have dinner with the girls. And so I budget that in or whatever. And so personal budgets to me now are a lot easier than what they were when I was younger in our marriage.
Yeah. And personal budget for me, I mean, I struggle. What I struggle with so much with my personal budgeting is like, on the one hand, is like I enjoy treating my wife and daughter. I like taking us out to eat. I like to do things. I
like that.
You love that. But like, I like to do that on the one hand, but on the other hand, I recognize that is like an $80 hole I'm shooting in my bi-weekly, paycheck. And then I fall into my own personal trap of like, for the amount of money it takes for us to eat out twice, I could buy a week's worth of groceries. So like I wrestle with that balance point back and forth with me personally. I also wrestle with the fact that like, I recently made a very, very, very expensive purchase.
Yes. Which I'm excited about, which probably was a lot of the push that you got from me to spend the money. We have it, spend it.
Well, and it was something that haven't think I've talked to you about a lot, but like I've wanted that for about 4 or 5 years. It's been a very long time. That's been on
I've known that.
Yeah. It's been on my radar, but it was always, at first it was like, oh, that's like $2,500, and at the time we just didn't have it. And then as my finances continued to improve, the price improved too. So it was never like financially crippling, but it was always a not insignificant amount of money. And now the money's been spent, there are other kind of ancillary things that have to be purchased to go with it. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, if it were just me as a single man, I would like wear the same socks till they had holes in them and eat peanut butter sandwiches, 6 meals a day until I would do whatever it took to accomplish this financial goal, because my own comfort is irrelevant in that.
It's funny because before we turned the mic on for this episode, we were talking about how you only have 3 shirts, which he doesn't. He has more than 3 shirts. But I told him that we needed to spend some money and get him some new shirts.
I have a whole drawer full of shirts.
Anyway, go ahead.
Anyway, but like that's a personal budgetary thing with me, is that if I have whatever my near-term goal is like I will find ways for me to personally, without taking from Gillian or Piper, to allocate that money to accomplish that goal as quickly and as voraciously as possible. And as soon as that goal has been accomplished, I move on to the next goal. And this is all, by the way, given the fact that I'm still making like extra payments on the mortgage, I'm still putting away for, Social Security, a retirement annuity, and a 401k. So I mean, I'm paying into 3 separate retirements, and I'm
paying into none.
Social Security.
Oh well, Social Security, if it's around when we get to that point.
I know, but the point remains, like, and I'm making extra payments on the truck. I mean, I'm doing what I can to accomplish these near-term goals, given that I'm not neglecting the long-term goals of making the big to long-term decisions for all these other things to put our family in the best position possible. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things where it's like, personal budget sometimes isn't anything as formalized as writing down on a piece of paper. Sometimes it is just raw spending habits. Like, are you the person who saves relentlessly for the thing you want, or are you the person that kind of spends money more freely and then realizes after the fact that, oh, damn, the money's gone?
So this year has been different because I do make I wouldn't say a lot less than what I did when I was at the museum, but I do make less money, at least for this year. I got a nice little raise for next year, so thanks for that. But it was easier for me to save money for the big goals. And so Phil's big goals are things like night vision and guns and things like that. My big goals are trips to the beach that cost $2,000 to $3,000 for one trip for a week in a condo. And I, because I wanted it so bad, I was able to put $400 away every month for that trip. And it worked. Obviously, we went to the beach. We had a wonderful time, but I have not been able to do that since I started this new job. So,
Can I sidebar?
okay, I don't know the way you looked at me.
Oh no, I remember something that happened on that trip, which is I wanted to slip it in here because I don't want to lose the timeline. But when we first started that trip, Gillian realized that she had an expense hit her checking account that wasn't supposed to hit her account at that time.
Yeah,
so
Piper's tuition.
yeah. So even though the money you had allocated the money for like literally the condo, food, the expenses, like you were prepared to pay for that whole trip, which is kind of what I told you. Like, if you want to do that, like, I'm gonna need you to shoulder the majority of that burden because I have things going, I have money going all these other places. And then when we got there and you realize you have this hole in your checking account, I was there like, okay, well, I've got X amount of money like on standby just in case something like this happened.
Right, and I had over budgeted, so we had the money to spend for this trip. But where it did hurt me was that $500 was going to go to set up my new classroom and, new clothes for a new job, and we still had to get a couple of things for school for Piper and things like that. So we were short on that, and I kind of beat myself up, although it wasn't my fault because the money was not supposed to come out of my account. It was supposed to be taken out over several months through my paycheck. And it wasn't supposed to be one big lump sum. Thankfully, though, I had enough cushion that it didn't really hurt us. But if it were to happen today, yeah, it would hurt. It would hurt real bad. And I would be coming to you and saying, hey, this has happened. Hopefully, it's not my fault. Usually, I don't make those big mistakes like I used to anymore. But like I said, this one wasn't my fault.
No, this one literally something happened that wasn't supposed to happen. But
yeah.
Regardless, we had prepared ahead of time. We had over prepared for that trip. I had over prepared for that trip because like what we had originally discussed was like this trip's on your finances, but I still went out there with several $100s in my checking account and cash because you know that about me. Like, I'm not going to travel across the country without every dime I need to get home because that's just that's built into me.
I think luckily when this thing happened to us, and I'm about to explain this, we actually were going to the beach again. I think we were newlyweds. I can't remember if we were just engaged or we had already been married, but we went to the beach and your radiator blew.
My radiator popped on that trip, yeah.
Yeah, and so here we are. We were supposed to leave the next day.
We weren't newlyweds. I think we had just gotten engaged.
Well, either way, your radiator had blown up, and we were supposed to leave the next day, and now we don't have a car. So, it wasn't like we could just be like, hey, Mom, hey, Dad, can you transfer some money into my account? Because that wasn't the case either. I had no financial strings attached to my parents at that moment that I knew of. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you did either. I think if we needed to get some money wired to us or whatever, we could have. But, that was one of those moments where I was super grateful that my husband or fiance, whatever moment in time this was, had a little bit better spending habits and personal budgeting than I did, because I knew we were going to be fine. It was kind of a blow to what we had.
Well, I wasn't worried about the money. What I was primarily concerned about was just finding the freaking part. Because, Ross was on that trip with us, and he and I, we called every part shop within, I want to say, like 30 miles of where we were. And we found exactly one radiator for my... You would think a radiator for a Mazda Miata in a beach town would be like, yeah, there'd be like piles of them on every street corner because like it'd be a really popular car to have out there at the beach. But I swear to God, you couldn't find the silly thing. I couldn't find the silly thing. We finally found one. I want to say it was in Foley. Yeah, we had to go all the way to Foley for it. But yeah, we got back to the place where we'd parked the car, slammed the radiator in, filled it up with coolant, and bled it out in the parking lot, got it going. First thing we had to do was go tell the owner of the establishment, like, hey, my car's in your parking lot, please don't get it towed.
So,
It'll be gone by tomorrow.
but my spending habits then were out of this world. It was crazy. But now I did this yesterday. And I told you about this at breakfast yesterday. My spending habits, besides like things that I feel like I really do need on Amazon or whatever, have been curtailed so much that I won't spend money on myself. And like I was just telling Phil before we started this episode, I really need something. I really, really need something for my personal attire or something like that. And I have needed it for quite some time, but I've been putting it off because it's going to cost a good amount of money. And when I say good amount of money, I'm talking like maybe $150. I don't want to spend that
They cost that much?
on myself. They could, yeah.
Holy
I don't
moly.
want to spend that much on myself. Not only, I mean, mainly because like summer's coming up, so and Piper's about to go through this major growth spurt. I can feel it coming,
She's grown.
and she's gonna need some things.
Hasn't she grown like 2 inches in the last...
No, it's something like 3 to 4 since July of last year. Anyway, that's not what I'm talking about.
Sorry.
I have a really hard time spending money on myself because things are needed around the house. Things are needed for Piper. Things are needed for school. Like when I say school, like they do a lot of field trips at her school, and that's not a huge blow, but I want to make sure that that's there. The cost of groceries has gone up dramatically.
Doubled.
The one thing that I do spend money on for myself is shoes because I have such a hard time with shoes and pain in my ankle and things like that. And a lot of times my shoes cost upwards of $100 a pair. So those are things. But my spending habits are much different than what they used to be. It's a much more mature habit of spending.
Yeah, and my spending habits have actually kind of gone the opposite direction. Like I used... I mean, look, the whole weekly coffee date, I mean, you would have never gotten 20-year-old me to take you out to Starbucks once a week.
Well, we don't go to
or twice a
Starbucks.
week. No, but my point is, like, PJs, same difference. But
PJs love veterans. Starbucks doesn't love... Anyway,
they
go
cost
ahead.
the same amount of money.
Coffee date.
My point is, like, when I was in my 20s, like, I would not bat an eye to spend several $100s on a suspension upgrade for the car that I was racing. Wouldn't even think twice about it. I would save the money, I would budget out, allocate it, I'd spend it on that because, like, that was my hobby at the time, and I was all in on that. But it's not that I viewed like dates because like taking you out to dinner was different in my head somehow, but it was like
I hope so.
it was let's just stop and get a coffee, and I'd be like, I don't want to spend money on that because I put everything into two black and white categories of either this is a legitimate expense or this is just like a waste of money. And if it was a waste of money, I would fight to the death because I didn't want to waste the money. I wanted to save it and then allocate it towards something else. And I've relaxed a little bit.
Why?
Over the years because you wore me down.
Because I told you that there's no point in life in saving and getting to retirement age and then having all this money when we may never get to retirement age. Something could happen that we never make it to build our dream home or to have these plans and these dreams come to realization. And so just like I said when we started the show, you have to live in the moment. And that's not saying you have to blow your savings and blow your retirement and blow your paycheck every 2 weeks. But it is to say that you have to live. We can't just sit in this house all day and be like, oh no, we can't go do something fun today because we're saving money for 30 years down the road.
I mean, I could, but
You could, but you have been better about saying, no, you know what? We're going to go spend $150 today on, or even $300 today on a day trip to Baton Rouge to go museum hopping and eat a good dinner at a nice restaurant and things like that.
or even on the cheaper end of things, like, hey, we're sitting around the house bored. It's a Saturday. The weather's beautiful outside. Like, why don't we go get like Raising Cane's or burgers or something? Go sit out by the lakefront, which appeals to me because it's much more affordable than $300 in Baton Rouge. But it's still a get out of the house, go have some fun, enjoy ourselves.
Unfortunately, making those fun memories like that and seeing, bringing our daughter to have experiences that she's going to remember and having that time together cost money. And yeah, we could sit here and play board games all day and we could watch movies together and eat popcorn and pizza and all that stuff, but I am one of those people, and that's why my budget looks the way that it does, that you have to live. Like you're working your butt off to make money. You're, like you tell me, you're selling your time. You are selling your time to your employer to make money to do what? What do you, to pay bills, obviously, to keep a roof over your head, but what else? Like, we can't just sit around and not do anything all day, every day, because there's money to be saved.
And this isn't spending habits, but this is like the value of your time. This is also the reason why, like 10 years ago, I changed industries. Because the industry I was working in, I was living out of a suitcase 6 months out of the year. And if I'd stayed in that, I very well might be making more money than I do now. It would be a much more high-paced, high-pressure industry. It appealed to me for a lot of reasons, and I really enjoyed what I did, but I recognized very quickly that, like, this is not going to be a great situation for having a child in, because, like, I want to be here. I want a 9 to 5. I want to be home every night with my wife and kid. I don't want to FaceTime my wife and daughter from halfway across the country because I'm working in their TY job. That's not what I wanted. So I made the decision years ago to take a drastic reduction in pay at the time, and I've worked my way back up plus some.
Yeah.
But I made the decision to have a more livable schedule with better work-life balance, and to be home every night, and to get infinitely more paid time off than I did then. I mean, I made that decision for all those reasons, because I made the decision that there are some jobs that are just not worth it to me. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't want to ever say, like, money is no object, because money's a thing, but not all money is good money, and not all money is worth it. There's a certain level of my time, or a certain time investment, I'm just not willing to sell for any price, much less for the price that's being offered. So, like, that's a lot of the same decision you just made changing industries. It was, I want the work-life balance back. So
Yeah.
the back end of that is it tightened up our budget. It's not going to mean as many beach vacations. It's not going to mean as much play money. But it does mean that we are together as a family more often. It means that we have the ability to be present more often. And if it means that we have to do a day trip to the lakefront versus a week in the condo, I mean, to me, that's worth it.
I agree.
It's hard for her to swallow,
It's hard.
though. She's able to choke that one down real hard.
It's hard for me. It's really hard for me to know that I am about to have 2 months of vacation time. And now, being a teacher, I know what summers are going to be like, because I'm still going to be working. I have lesson plans for a year to look at. Plus, I've taken on, more classes, teaching, something different, or incorporating something different into my classroom. So I have a lot of work to do over the summer with lesson plans and finding new curriculum and things like that. But this is going to be the first summer off in 16 years since I was in college. And so I'm going to really soak that in. I just wish that I was soaking some of that in on the beach this summer. And that's just not going to happen. We're just not going to the beach. And it's really hard for me to think about that. But but it does mean that I have 2 months to be with Piper. And you work from home now. You have every other Friday off. So the time that will be invested back into my family, it beats a beach vacation. It does. It beats a beach vacation.
I flip-flopped these last two banners because I thought this order worked out a little better.
Yeah.
Debt. Can you make it work for you?
I don't know. You're the one who added this banner, and I mean, sure, you're the finance guy. I don't know if you can make debt work for you, but debt scares the living hell out of me. So, yeah, debt can work for you if you're scared to get into it.
Well, here's the thing. I think a certain amount of fear of debt is healthy. In the same way that, like, you should be a little afraid of, like, bears and tigers and lions and so on and so forth, because they could tear your head off and stick it back down your neck. So, like, you know, you should be wary of debt. Mm-hmm. Debt can be used in a very controlled, specific manner to leverage yourself up. Most people can't pay cash for a house or cash for a car, at least a newish car. So in those instances, debt allows us to have a thing and make use of it before we have managed to save the money. Where I think debt can be crippling is when we allow debt to replace a savings account. Because like that's a big thing with you and me is if I can live without it, literally if I can live without it, and if I can't afford it, then I don't need it. Like we don't go put stuff on a credit card because I just want it right now and I don't get paid for 2 or 3 days. That's not the way we operate because
no, we actually do not and never have. In the 20 years that we've been almost 20 years we've been together, have never had a credit card. Well, you actually, I take
we
that
both
back.
have had a credit card.
I have had a credit card when I needed new tires.
This is going to be fun.
What?
Go ahead.
That's all. I've had one credit card in my life, but I have never been in like real credit card debt. I have never been that person that's like, oh, I'll just put this on the card today, or I'll put my gas on the card. And there is something to be said about credit cards and, you know, raising your credit score and all that stuff. I did it. I think I did it a harder way, but yeah, we don't have the debt that we have now is not usual for what people today have debt. You know, we have mortgage and we have car notes.
And those car notes are going to be gone within...
Yours is going to be gone in a few months.
2 months.
And mine is in a year. So, you know, we take care of those cars and make sure that they last us longer than what the car payment is. And then a house, of course, is just... we're spending that money and it's going back into it. I mean, the value of our house has doubled since we've moved in, so it's worth that amount of debt. Yeah. So that's how we're making that debt work for us.
And a house is like a savings account that you get to live in. You know what I'm saying?
That's
like
true.
they over the long run, they usually appreciate. Once you pay it off at the end of 30 years, you have an asset that you own outright that is worth hopefully a substantial amount. Mm-hmm. I mean, the one thing I would caution a person is don't fall into the trap of saying, well, I bought the house for $150,000 and at the end of 30 years it was worth $300,000, so it's worth twice as much. Because I'm like, no. If you add up what your interest payments were and you add that into everything else, you probably paid $400,000 for that $300,000 house, because that's the miracle of charging interest on a loan. Mm-hmm. You will never, unless it is like zero interest for 12 months and you pay it off in 11 and a half months and you don't have a penalty for that, you will never, ever, ever pay less than what the principal was if on an interest-bearing loan. So, like, even in the course of houses, I caution people about falling into this trap of thinking, well, it doesn't matter what the interest rate is, it doesn't matter what the principal is, because it's going to be worth more than I paid for it when it's over. And I'm like, but if that were the case, banks wouldn't make any money, which means that's never going to work that way. Mm-hmm. So, like, you have to consider the fact that what interest is a penalty you're paying for not saving your money. Now, sometimes the penalty is worth it to have newish, reliable vehicles, to have a house to live in, not be lighting money on fire in the front yard of your apartment you're renting. Sometimes paying that penalty is worth it, but it is still a penalty. It is still a tax on the people who don't save their money. So what I warn people of is, if you are going into debt for stuff you can live without, You can live without a big screen TV. You can live without a living room set. You can live without a vacation. You can live without you can live without all that stuff. If you can live without it, you shouldn't be going into debt for it. Discussion over. If you can, like, if your life is arranged in a certain way and you could get by with like a $5,000 door slammer car you can pay cash for, now you have to take out a loan, I encourage that. That becomes a little more difficult when you have like your wife and child in a vehicle that you want to be reliable so they don't get broke down someplace, or like in my position where I used to have almost a 90-mile commute. A car that might break down on the 90-mile commute is useless to me. Because if I break down in the middle of New Orleans East, I have a problem.
So you told me with this banner to not let you go too far into
that was too far?
Well, I'm just going to reel you back in. So how do you think you can make debt work for you?
You can make debt work for you in a very narrow scope when it's things you cannot live without. And the penalty of the individual personal penalty of not incurring that debt is worse than paying potentially double what the thing is worth.
Okay. That makes sense.
So in that narrow scope, I can't live without it, and the penalty is not so egregious that I'd rather figure it out without it. In that narrow scope, debt. Take it on. Understand, though, that if you take on debt, even for a really good, valid reason, every month that debt persists hurts you. Mm-hmm. So if you take on debt and you can afford to make even a 10% overpayment on the principal every month, just that 10% extra will knock months off the back end of the loan, which will save you potentially dozens, if not hundreds of dollars in interest, depending on what we're talking about. So, like, anybody that's ever told you just make the minimum payment, eject that person from your financial life. Like, you should be paying down your debt as aggressively as you can while not neglecting monthly expenses.
Yeah.
Which is why I've been making extra payments on our mortgage since the last time we refinanced it. I've been making extra payments on that truck since the day I took on the loan. And like right now, it'll be paid off in 2 months, which means that truck will be paid off 9 months early, I think. There's a 5-year loan. It'll be paid off in right around 4.5 years, give or take. So, I mean, actually, March. I bought it in March. So it'll be paid off in September. So, yeah, it'll be paid off 8-9 months early. But that wasn't like a huge amount extra. That was like another $50 a month.
Yeah.
On a $320-something truck loan. So, like, it doesn't take a lot of extra to make a big difference. But that's all I got to say about debt, even though I've talked a lot about debt.
I was told not to let him go on this rampage, but...
Well, but to be fair, like, my education and my background is a lot of finance and economics and money management. I mean, it's a lot of my background, so I try not to kill people with it.
When I gave you this idea for a show... I was hesitant. I was like, maybe we put this off for a couple of months. And then I was like, no. We're going to go on and have this one so we can just be done with the finance one.
I mean, if this winds up being like Matter of Facts podcast, we will circle back around to this sooner or later.
Well, especially on this podcast, because finances have so much to do with family and raising families and personal values and things like that. So I know.
So how do we teach finances to children?
Teaching finances to children.
You and I have wrestled back and forth with this over the years.
Yeah? What have we wrestled with? Tell me what we've wrestled with.
Well, we've wrestled with like how much we discuss money in front of Piper because we don't want her to get self-conscious about asking for things.
But that's not... I don't categorize that as teaching finances to children. I categorize that as making a wise decision as a parent to keep adult things out of a child's life. Like, she is not at that point yet where she needs to know what the finances of our home is because it does exactly what it's done to her. She's heard us, because our daughter likes to listen in on conversations.
She's probably listening right now.
She probably is. But she's heard us talk about finances before, and it has put her in a state of anxiety a lot of times. We saw it this weekend. You know, she spent $10 of her money on a toy. Her dumb mother, me, broke the toy because I was playing with it. It was an accident. I really, obviously, don't go around breaking my child's toys. But I told her, I told her I would go buy her a new one. It was my fault. Of course, we did this whole apology, hug it out thing. She was very disappointed and upset. And I said, I will give you the money to fix this problem. And she did not want that money because, well, one, I think she is so proud of what she has saved. Now, our child, Phil, has done a really good job, and I have too. Our child keeps a ledger of the amount of money she has in her savings, her savings box that she keeps with her dad. So she knows what money is coming in and out. So every Christmas, every birthday, every whatever, she puts money in there. She keeps a tally of that. She keeps a ledger of what's coming in and what's coming out. And that's one way that we have taught finances to her. Another way that we have taught finances to her is a silly game that we play when we go grocery shopping.
It works.
We play The Price is Right at the counter. And so like right when they start checking out, we all have to say what we think it's going to cost. We look at what we have on the belt, and then we all say, how much is this going to cost? What's your answer? And so we'll throw out numbers, $186, $250, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes, like it did the other day when, I went grocery shopping, the clerks get in on this game, and they always ask us, well, what happens when you win? Like, whatever. And then it's back and forth with me and Phil of, well, then that person has to pay or whatever. But it gives her an awareness of what things cost. Things don't just appear in the house. Things have to be paid for us to have fun, for us to have fun things. And she is very aware, as much as an 11-year-old can be aware, of what it takes to have those fun things or even have the food to eat on a weekly basis. Like, she is aware of those things. We definitely purposely do not allow ourselves to talk about those hard, like, conversations where we can't afford this month, or we can't afford this summer, or we can't do this or that. But then on the other hand, in that same vein, we do, because she has to understand that money has to be budgeted and put towards different things. And so she understands that, you may not get a toy this go round when we go to the grocery store. In fact, there have been many times when we sat in the car before we got out of the car to go into the store when we have said, don't ask for anything, because the answer is no. The answer is already no. So even if you find something, the answer is going to be no. Now that goes into a whole nother story of or a whole nother episode of holding true to what you tell your children. If you say no, then the answer still has to be no, and no amount of puppy dog eyes and tears and fits can you say yes, because you have to hold your ground. But anyway, so we teach her finances in those two ways, and I think the best thing that we do, and what we've done since she was probably 4 or 5, is that ledger that she keeps in her box.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing of it is like, we don't, in addition to all that, and by the way, that ledger, that's not just teaching like how to look at money coming in, money going out. It's the basics of how to balance a checkbook.
Yeah, which used to be taught to us. When I was in high school, you had to learn how to balance a checkbook, and you learned all those things, and it's not taught in school as far as I know, at least. Well, I have to take that back. This school that she's in right now, there was a partnership with a company that came in and talked about financing, and they had to go through different scenarios, almost like plays. Mm-hmm. They had so much money, quote unquote, in their checking account. They had to create a budget. They had to run a business, something like that. But they were learning what it took to do all those things. So they had monopoly money, and they had to buy stuff for their company. What it costs to renovate a building, and how much, don't forget, you have to pay rent this month. And so I was very, very thankful for that program to come in, and I hope that our school continues to do that. But I don't know if that sort of thing is taught anymore in the public schools. I don't know. We're not there anymore, and we aren't going to go back. So
well, but by the same
maybe it is, and I hope it is.
By the same token, like, I had that personality that says, like, I almost don't care if it gets taught in school, because there are certain things, as a parent, I'm going to teach my daughter. And money management is one of those things. But, like, the whole ledger that she keeps with her individual personal savings, I've always had a thing with her where like if it's something that's for the family, I'll shoulder that. If it's something that's primarily for her, but like we're like the DLC packs for a Switch game, like all the extra tracks and everything for Mario Kart, because we play that together. I always told her, like, I'll go in half and half with you. Or if it's a game she played that it's a game for her, but I know we're all going to wind up playing it together, I'll cover that half and half with her. But I always make her go pull that money, write it down the ledger, because there was a time when she kind of wanted something. And she went and looked at that ledger and looked at how much she had left. And she literally stopped and said, I don't want it that bad. I better save this money just in case. And she knew that she, like, I can't remember what it was. It was birthday, Christmas, something was coming up. And she's like, well, I'll probably get some money then, so I'll wait till then. And I was like, yes, we're making headway.
Yeah.
But like my whole perspective on teaching children finances goes back to that very basic principle of, are we raising children or adults?
Yeah.
I'm raising an adult. I understand she's a child. I don't want her to feel guilt about asking for things. I don't want her to feel anxiety about it. That's not the goal. And I'm very quick to tell her, like, honey, if I offer something to you, I have offered it to you knowing I can afford it. And you don't need to be concerned about the money because Dad has said, I got that. I'm like, but I am very quick but I do talk to her about things like the grocery cart because I want her to have an appreciation for how much money it takes to feed a family. Every now and then we talk about like, and I don't even remember how this comes up a lot of times. Like sometimes she'll just ask randomly because she has, a lot of kids don't have a concept of money, and I'll tell her what the mortgage costs. Like every month, that much money goes up in smoke just so you have a place to sleep at night. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to prime the pump for a child that's going to enter young adulthood and is probably eventually going to get a part-time job or do something. And I want her to have an appreciation for what things cost so that way when the day comes that she starts incurring semi-adult expenses like car insurance, gas, going out to eat with your friends, I want her to look at that bill and I want her to look at how much she gets paid from this part-time job. And I want her to draw that link very quickly of, I had to work 20 hours this week to make this money and I spent it in 45 minutes. I have to draw that line for her because like teaching finances to children is no different than teaching them anything else. They have to learn it. There's no option for them not to. How fast and in what method I think is a discussion for parents to take on and to make a gauge of how mature is that child, what is the way. Like, can I make this a game? How can I institute something in their daily life that's going to make them have an appreciation for money? But the other thing I was going to say that we've never done is we don't give money for chores.
No, she doesn't get an allowance.
Nope. Because my point of view is very simple. It's I don't get paid for doing the laundry. I don't get paid for mowing the lawn. Like I do that because that's my responsibility to the family. So my point of view is if you want quote unquote money for chores, you're going to take something off of my plate or off of your plate. Like if you want spring cleaning, if you want to clean all the baseboards in the house, I'm positive your mother will pay you so she doesn't have to do that. Or if you want to fold a couple baskets of laundry, I have no problem doing that because while you're folding that laundry, I'm going to go outside and detail my truck or do something you can't do. But it's always this is the minimum amount of effort you're going to put forth because you exist in this family and you have to help. You have to pull your weight. If you go above that, we can discuss some kind of monetary incentive. But you don't get free $20 a week for playing, Minecraft. Like that's not how this works.
No. Or for bringing your clothes to the laundry room.
Yes,
you don't get choice money for that.
I'm sorry, I'm not raising a communist.
Well, and it's important to remember, or not even just remember, but to think about. We're raising Piper financially aware, money aware, because you and I got a firm grasp on that early in our relationship. And so while finances still sometimes come up for us and cause a little bit of a rift, and it really doesn't anymore, except when I tell you, yeah, spend $4,000 on that. Go for it, babe. Live a little. I think you're still dealing with that a little bit, going, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. But anyway.
It's going to hurt for a while.
It's the parents have to get a grasp on their finances first, because your kids are watching, they're listening. We are big examples of that, because we know that we have a little eavesdropper in this house. And so you as an adult have to play the adult, what's the word I'm looking for? Not the adult character. You have to play the adult character in this dynamic of your family, because your kids are watching, they're listening, they're learning, and they're learning from you. And if you don't want them to perpetuate that habit of your spending and you're not budgeting and things like that, then you have to get a grasp on it now. I grew up in a house where finances were a huge fight in my childhood home. And it's still not something that my parents have gotten a grasp on. And I don't mean to out my parents, especially on this podcast. I'm trying to keep people's names out of it. But it was something that I feel like my dad focused a little bit more on than what my mom did. And so what I did learn from him as far as budgeting and spending and things like that were very good for me to have. But I also watched how my mother spent and, lived a lifestyle that wasn't in our budget and things like that. And so I grew up knowing that that's not how I wanted to live. It was hard for me when I first got out of college and you and I had first started dating and things like that, because I was living that lifestyle that was way out of my budget. But then I reeled it back in going, wait a second, I've seen this before. I know how this ends. I can't do this. And then once Piper was born, I was really, really glad that we had gotten to that point of, finances just, they weren't, I don't know, I guess I just trusted you more. Like I just looked at you and I was just like, well, he's doing these things to the betterment of our family. Is it hard? Yeah, I really do want to go to the beach this summer, or I really wanted to do this time, or whatever. But I just think it's very important for parents and the adults that are raising children or whatever, raising adults, that they have to get that grip on these things, and they have to provide that example to those kids, because all you're doing is living a lie. You're telling your kid one thing and you're doing the exact opposite. Then what, you are the only one to blame when their little lives fall apart financially.
Yeah, and I would tell everybody to put finances in a lot of the same box as a lot of the things we talk about. Finances is something that the husband and wife have to come together on and have to work together on for the betterment of the family. And teaching your child finances is no different than teaching them any of the values we've talked about up to this point, or any of the values we will in the future, because we believe that that is a component of a healthy, mature, functional adult. And all I would ever tell a person is like, in my experience, and this is something I've told Gillian, I doubt she would fight with me on, is it has been my experience that how much money's coming into a family doesn't have anywhere near as much sway over the financial health of that family as how much goes out. Because I have seen families like 1-to-1, side by side. One family makes double what the other does, perpetually broke. The other family makes middle class wages, not great money, but middle class, and retired with a silver spoon in their ear. Like, could do whatever they want, travel.
Mouth. Silver spoon in their
I was
mouth.
going to say somewhere else, but
okay.
The point
We won't
remains,
go
like, the second family that never made a lot of money monthly they've retired well, they're comfortable, they can do whatever they want, see the world, travel, blow money on, they could buy Corvettes and bigger houses if they wanted to. But they got to that point by saving and by being conservative with their spending. So that's the way they're going to do it for the rest of their lives. And they will, I can't see that family ever really running into money trouble unless something catastrophic happens.
Yeah.
But the first family, the catastrophe is the way they spend money.
Yeah.
And that has perpetually left them in the situation they're in. So all I would ever tell a person is, if you want to put your children on the best possible footing for life with regards to finances, teach it to them. Teach them how to balance a checkbook. Teach them the value of money. Be honest with them about what things cost and about the concept of selling your time to an employer for money, so that they understand a couple of things. First of all, just how much you have to work for basic living expenses, just how much you have to work for anything extra, how fast you can blow a paycheck, and last but not least, teach them the value of learning a marketable skill. Because I cannot even explain to you like how crippling it is for a person with no job skills to go out into a minimum wage world, work themselves to death, and then come home and the money's gone in 15 minutes. So all those things are part of finances and part of financial health, financial management. All I would ever encourage a person to do is please take control of your finances. And if you don't know what to do, I am happy to give free, unsolicited advice about finances to anybody. You will not sue me if it blows up in your face, because I don't give financial advice on this podcast. And most of it you get out of a Dave Ramsey book anyway. It's pretty common sense stuff.
I was about to say that. Yeah, we do a lot of the Dave Ramsey stuff.
I tell everybody all the time, we're not financial geniuses. We have conservative spending habits and we have logical spending habits, and that's a lot of what we employ. And we try to rein in the emotional spending as much as possible, and we try to teach that to our child. So I guess we'll cap that one off right about there. But I would just say that, money will always be a disagreement between married couples, but I feel like money should only ever be regarded as a means to an end, and what you're really disagreeing over is the priorities of how you spend that money. And there is no one right answer for all families, but everybody has to find something they can live with and they can afford to take care of themselves.
It's a good place to end.
Hallelujah. All
right. Well, thank y'all for watching. And if you're just listening on the audio, we appreciate you always listening to us. And, it's like I put in the post yesterday, like, comment, share, subscribe. You know the drill. Just do that to help the podcast. That's all.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. Have a great day.